What's going on, everybody? It's Ben from BOGO Media here, and today I want to talk about something that's been very interesting to me, a question: how do we lower grocery prices and really consumer prices at large? I feel like all of us can relate on the fact that the price of everything has gone up over the last couple of years. And the thing that I think is most applicable, besides maybe gas prices, is our grocery bill. I've personally, from comparing what I used to pay to what I pay now, my grocery bill has gone up at least 50% over the last couple of years. And luckily for me, I'm only worrying about buying groceries for one person, and it still affects me. I can't imagine how much it would affect a family of five that's only living off of one income. So it's not something to be overlooked. And in many ways, the price of groceries, I think, is a big reason why Donald Trump won the presidential election of 2024. So this has been something to think about for me the last couple of weeks. And because in many cases, people are doubtful that Trump will even be able to lower the grocery prices, even though it's been a promise that he ran on. Well, his answer to this question and to answer the question of lowering prices in general has been lowering the cost of energy. And we can do this by drilling for oil, opening gas pipelines, coal mining, nuclear energy, which Trump is something he's big on that. And all of this can start happening when you start deregulating. There's so many environmental regulations on drilling for gas and oil and creating our own energy and becoming energy independent in the United States while we're currently pretty energy dependent because of a lot of the restrictions we've placed on ourselves in the name of climate change and all this other stuff. I think there is an environmental aspect that you have to be careful with, but you can't do it at the sacrifice of the American people. And a lot of those environmental studies and ideas are very uh, questionable, I can say. So, how would this impact businesses and lower the cost of operating a business? Well, first things first, it it's cheaper to keep the lights on when you have lower energy. And you think about a small grocery store or a barber shop, for example, a small business, when it costs less for them. Well, let's start with this. When it costs more for them to keep the lights on and have basic energy at the business, their margins get slimmer and they're going to pass it on to the consumer. And so when you take that off, that's a big cost for especially for small businesses that gets stripped away and could potentially be passed on to the consumer. The second way that the lower energy costs will impact businesses is in the supply chain. And that was a big excuse during COVID and potentially a reason, but I think now might be an excuse as to why prices went up because there are a bunch of supply chain issues driven by the uh, COVID, but also the cost of energy. And if you lower the cost of energy, it will lower prices all down the supply chain from transportation. When you're hauling things across the country in big trucks, the prices of gas being lower is huge, especially in also production and manufacturing at factories. Kind of going back to that, keeping the lights on point. If you can lower that cost, that can be passed on. That won't be that additional cost when energy is high is not going to be passed down the supply chain. So lowering the cost of energy is very big, and I think it's a kickstart to answering this question of how we lower prices and I guess in this instance grocery prices. But if the cost so the cost to operate a business is lower, but why and this is a question multiple people have asked me, and it's the trickiest part of this thing is why would businesses lower the prices if us, the consumer, we already pay very high prices and have now become fairly accustomed to it, which is not good, but it's the case. Why wouldn't they just take those additional profits and keep them in their pocket? I think the way that you force businesses to lower prices is by increasing competition. And I think that Trump and the administration, but also just as a general concept, and this is my idea. So please let me know what you guys think about this. I kind of got here, and I think this is the way that they'll try to do it, is increasing competition in two ways: deregulation and tax cuts. And these are two things that Trump is very well known for. Deregulating. The United States is one of the most, has some of the most strict regulations and complex regulations in the world, maybe the most. And taxes are also crippling in our country for a lot of businesses. Now, This is not as impactful on the big established chains and retailers as it is to the small, medium-sized businesses. It affects them all, but it affects the small and medium-sized businesses that are trying to enter into markets and grow because they have less capital to play with and they are going to be hurt more by large taxes or regulations, many times bar people from even starting up businesses or trying to grow their business. So, what I think ultimately this will do is allow new entrants into the markets to compete with large retailers. This will allow them to not be crippled from the start, and by growing and entering into these markets, they can enter in at a lower price, a lower cost for the consumer. Say, hey, I can offer you this. I know you've been shopping at this large retailer, Fry's or Kroger, for example, but hey, I'm a new grocery store in the area, and I've been able to start up this business and grow it and really improve it because a lot of this regulatory red tape has been cut away, whether it's environmental stuff or uh, you know, zoning, all these different things that are just a lot of crazy regulations in in the process of starting up a business. I've been able to start up a business. Also, I'm not being hit by large taxes, um, which will hurt my business and many times, like I said before, maybe even prevent people from trying to get into it. Say, hey, I know you've been shopping here, but I'm right across the street and I can offer you a carton of eggs for $1.50. Whereas over here you're paying 250. All of a sudden you got customers going over there, and this will force a response by the large retailers when they start undercutting the prices in the name of competition. They're trying to grow their business. The large retailers, once this happens and starts occurring enough, they're going to have to respond once they start losing customers to these other alternate entrants into the market. And I think in the similar way that the lowering of the cost of energy trickles through the supply chain, I think this increased competition also can trickle through the supply chain because people aren't just opening up grocery stores or businesses that are retailers where the customers go into the store and purchase things, but it can also be from distributors or manufacturers. Whereas before it wouldn't be such a profitable business if there's high taxes or lots of regulation, like I spoke of. But now you can compete. You say, okay, you know what? This could be a profitable business. I have capital. Why don't I invest in this and try to start a business? And so then there's competition down at that level. So the increased competition at every level throughout the supply chain and at every level within different markets, whether it's competing with large retailers, competing with medium-sized businesses or stores, or and even small businesses. All this increased competition will drive prices down lower over the long term. Now, the one issue I could see is that this could take some time to happen. I think the impact of the affordable energy, the low cost energy, will be felt pretty immediately. And that could help this process that I'm describing with the increased competition, I think the lower energy could boost the speed at which that increased competition occurs. But I also think that if our economy under Trump and this new administration is booming within the first year or so, and there's a lot of optimism, which there already is now, and we've seen in the stock market, I think that could speed up this process, and it won't take as many potentially years to really come to fruition. So in conclusion, I think that the way that we lower grocery prices, and it's not going to be easy. I think it's difficult because these businesses and retailers, they have been taking advantage of the consumer for a long time now. And like I said, I haven't. I'm always complaining about it, but I think many people have just become accustomed to the high prices and they're like, well, you know what? It is what it is. Let me just go pay $20 for a meal or let me go pay $6 for eggs. It's crazy stuff when you really compare to how much these things cost a few years back. So they've been taking advantage of us for a while. So how do we lower these grocery prices? One, lower the cost of energy, and I think that has a widespread impact. And then and that has a widespread impact of the margins of these businesses. But then okay, how do we get the businesses to lower the prices for the consumer through increased competition? And you increase that competition and allow new entrants into these markets by deregulating, cutting away all that red tape, and I think Trump is going to have he had some rule in his first term where it was like for every regulation that you add in, you have to cut five. And I think in final numbers, it was more than five for every regulation added. So lots of deregulation and lots of tax cuts. Trump implemented the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017, and that brought the corporate tax rate from 39% down to 21%. And it gets pretty complicated because which is huge, by the way. But it gets complicated because most businesses, their effective tax rate was far lower than 39% because all that money was overseas. So it was multi-purpose, his tax cuts, because it brought billions of dollars back to the United States in for a different reason. But these tax cuts are huge on the businesses. They're not crippling businesses and especially small businesses. So these are set to expire in 2025. So Congress has to ensure that these tax cuts are extended. And I think Trump wants to cut taxes, corporate taxes, even lower. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But I think those are the two ways you drive competition within these markets. And that will force a response to lower prices for the consumer. So please let me know what you think. This has been a very interesting subject for me, and I really hope we can get some cheaper prices soon.